Andy, I'm going to have you introduce yourself, and then talk about, just sort of I guess you share with us your background, and then.
Sure. Thank you. I have worked in the industry since '75. I started very young. I started working in retail. I went through academic training in nutritional and exercise biochemistry at grad school, and then I had consulted all along, actually consulted Metagenics before they were Metagenics, the big doctor brand, and had the pleasure of starting a company that pioneered creatine on 100 back in 1993. And we also pioneered evidence-based sports nutrition for supplements. So we did dozens of studies and have collaborated on about almost 100 clinical trials, mostly at academic centers ranging from AIDS-related muscle wasting to zinc metabolism and osteoarthritis. And I happen to be the privileged chair of the Scientific Advisory Board for trace minerals. And I just started as part of the team there, and pleased to be here.
Jose.
All right, how's it going, everyone?
Sounds pretty good.
So I'm Jose Vega. I'm the supplements category manager for Mom's Organic Market. Been doing that for about 6 years. Big background in nutrition, working on a doctoral program currently with a master's degree. I run an integrative health clinic, and I have a big passion for minerals and health overall. Working in the industry now for about a decade with Mom's Organic Market, so a lot of experience in the retail world as well as the clinical world because I've got my own practice. So just kind of happy to be on this panel, get invited to this panel. Thank you. And yeah, looking forward to talking more about remineralizing the world.
So I'm Dr. Darren Starkey. I've been with Trace Minerals, just started my 34th year with them. So I've had the privilege of working in a culture of trace minerals. And of course, my greatest passion has been how to teach and educate our single parents who can't afford an organic diet for their growing families, but can't not afford to put this balance back into them and their growing family for pennies on the dollar. So we're excited to share some thoughts and hopefully answer some questions.
And we know you. So talk about minerals. We talk a lot about vitamins and minerals, and the emphasis tends to be on vitamins, when in reality it should be a lot more on minerals. I guess, why are minerals so important today? What do they do, and why in particular now, what's happening to our food system and everything? Why is it more important? And look at Jose and get him to start us off, maybe.
Sure. Yeah, well, I mean, as many of you guys know, minerals are important for pretty much everything in our body. Everyone touts the line of magnesium is involved in over 300 enzymatic processes. That's like the textbook answer. But it's not just magnesium, as we know, and like as Bill was saying, selenium is growing rapidly. Selenium is also really important, and one that doesn't, I think, get enough limelight because it functions with our thyroid health, one of proteins. Lots of studies showing that the supplementation of it is very beneficial in certain autoimmune conditions. And the list goes on. Iodine is also very important. Copper, vanadium, chromium with insulin resistance. And it's unfortunate that minerals kind of don't get more publicity. They're really important in all different actions in our body, and as we're probably going to get into, they're not really in our diets nearly as much as they used to be for a whole host of reasons.
And we heard from Sherry and Sav and Bill. One of the things that we see is these individuals focus on specific elements. And I always ask the same question: show me in nature where you can eat a seed, a nut, a grain of fruit, or a vegetable, or a piece of protein that just has one element, and it doesn't exist. And so with the trace mineral blend, and focusing on that full spectrum and balance with those elements, that's where they become more of a food approach and a nutrient that our bodies can utilize as compared to an isolate. So I think that's the important part of putting that full spectrum and balance of trace minerals into our supplemental program.
Is that a little bit from what Jose said too? Like, what we don't realize is the magnesium or whatever, just
Sure.
how many different things it touches on in our body, so that effective, whether it's like 300. Yeah.
And I was going to say, to Darren's point, you know, a lot of these minerals, they interact with each other, they do a balancing act, so a full spectrum is always more important. Covering deficiencies in my book, clinically, is always probably the first thing I look at, especially if there's evidence in someone's diet or lifestyle that you can tell immediately, okay, you just don't have enough of X. But oftentimes I would lean towards dietary first, but whoa, why was that so much louder? Sorry. But supplementation is really important.
So, Anthony, what are some of the consequences you see of like mineral deficiencies? And you've worked a lot in the sports nutrition realm, too, which I think is an area. And you talked about hydration and sports nutrition growing, but you don't always make that correlation that it might minerals affecting us.
I think to what Jose was saying earlier, you have this issue or this perception that vitamins are much more sexy than minerals. And yet when you examine minerals, our gut bacteria, the microbiota, can produce 6 or 7 different vitamins. They can't make any minerals. And when you think about also the gut microbiome or microbiota cross-feeding and feeding other organisms in that composition, with making one organism makes a mineral or makes a vitamin, another one uses it because it can't make it. And then you layer over this very challenging issue of how do you detect an absence or an insufficiency, because deficiency is incredibly rare. So there's a spectrum from excess or lethal death from overdosing or toxicity to gross deficiency, but we rarely are over here. Maybe severe alcoholism, but in between here is this insufficiency, which, for example, iron, incredibly widely insufficient without anemia, but you can respond within 2 weeks without any change in blood picture. And so, and magnesium, one dose could be effective for different types of headaches, for sleep if you have the right dose. Then you also layer in these other issues of how minerals are now being shown to have an influence on the gut microbiota and behavior, gut function, brain function. So it's not what we eat or what you absorb, it's what you absorb and what your gut microbiota make that you also absorb. And so there are many interactions that we're still teasing apart, and 5 years from now, it'd be very fun to have this again and have it minerals in the microbiota being a discussion.
So are you saying, in your work, I guess, where do you see sort of it affecting people? If they're like...
If you can't measure most minerals well, you have to look at the diet. You have to look at anything like a proton pump inhibitor if they're taking something for chronic acid reflux. If they are consuming a lot of coconut water, which is devoid of sodium or almost lacking in sodium, and there are adverse effects with excess coconut water, which people believe is having a health halo. Nothing against it, but overconsumption can lead to a mineral imbalance. All these things need to go into the clinical or the intake picture. Then you sync that with symptoms, and you now have a very different picture rather than just what supplements are you taking, what supplements are you not taking. It's really difficult to just get something over the phone or via a couple text messages to discern what a person may need because of so many different inputs and subtractions that come up.
So what do you see in when you're working with people or see people come in?
Sure, yeah, and I was going to say you brought up so many good points. And I was going to say from the store retail side, you have a snapshot of, 5 minutes to 20 minutes. So you're not really going to pick up deficiencies truly because you need a really thorough health intake. It's great if you have any labs for stuff that's actually on that spectrum, as Anthony said, where you're actually deficient, which is more rare. I mean, I've seen actually a lot of iron anemia that's been detectable. That one is probably the most common one I've seen. It's some macrocytic anemia with B12, but that's a vitamin, so not a mineral. But in the retail world, you don't really know. You're going off of what the person's coming in, what they're saying, the symptoms they've displayed. Maybe they've done a lot of, especially in the natural products world, a lot of these people are coming in, they've went to somebody that's told them something, or they've done a hair analysis which has its problems, or they've done some type of test that's told them, hey, if they do this, it's a little better.
Whenever you say something really important.
I know, it's like every side. So a lot of times you can't really pick it up outside of maybe they're coming to you saying, I have this issue, or I know I'm magnesium deficient, which almost everyone probably is. But from a clinical perspective, there's different ways. Obviously, lab results can sometimes be there, but it really is, as Anthony said, a bigger symptomatic picture. What are they presenting with? What's their diet look like? What supplements are they taking? Are they on pharmaceuticals? Because so many of them deplete nutrients. I mean, if they're on a diuretic, they're going to be excreting way more of certain things. If they're taking something that upregulates how much potassium sits in the blood, then you're going to see an imbalance there. And with COVID, I know you brought it up in your slides, one of the things that I started to see real quickly is a lot of people massively taking zinc. And there's a balance between zinc and copper that needs to be met, and no one really that was coming to see me or talking, and I was hearing about it in the stores, was talking about the importance of copper and supplementing copper in tandem with the zinc to make sure that mineral balance was met. And functionally, I'll see deficiencies come up in a focused nutrition physical exam where I'll see signs on their body. So there's different things we look for in the nails, in the hair, in the eyes, in the mucosal lining that can indicate certain vitamins and minerals are deficient. The most prevalent one I see is stuff in the nails that can indicate protein, zinc, copper, iron deficiencies, sometimes skin. So another common one is skin tags. Skin tags showing that there may be some insulin resistance going on. I immediately start thinking about dietary stuff that's going on in their intake, and is there potentially a lack of chromium, a lack of vanadium, a lack of zinc? So that's kind of it.
What do you see, Darren? Or what do you
Well, being on the manufacturing side of things, of course, we hear, my favorite part of my job, by the way, is when these consumers call up. And by the way, I've loved my education. I love some of my professors. I've loved the texts that I've read, but the consumer has given me my greatest education when it comes to these products and nutrition. When they call up and say something to the effects, "Hey, Dr. Starkey, are you sure there's no drugs in this product?" And I always have to, it makes me sad because they assume that whatever came with lack of pain or improved health or must be a drug, because that's the way we're being educated as a society. But when I get to answer that question very quickly, there are no drugs involved in this product, referring to the concentrated trace mineral product. That's our, that's what's kept us front and center for the past 50 years. But when I get to ask them the question, what is it that why do you ask if there's a drug? And they get to express, they share with me their life-changing experience that they were told that they would have to live with or cope with, and then having some of those resolved just by putting that balance back into them. That's when it becomes fun, and I start making lots of notes. But at the same time, we always hear, of course, we're such a reactive society right now. It's not typically a proactive phone call. We get a reactive phone call, meaning if there's one thing I've heard in my office probably every day that I am in my office, if I'm not traveling for the company, it's, I didn't think this could happen to me, whether that be a diagnosis or an accident. But at the same time, when, they start coming to us because of health conditions, which we're not here to, we have to be cautious, and we have to, of course, direct in a way that we're not prescribing, but it's always a reactive response as to what a lot of our consumer base is calling us for. But they're starting to ask the right questions, right? They're starting to ask the right questions. They start questioning their food. Just like Sherry said, when we start seeing these huge groups that aren't eating any vegetables or any fruit in a week, and when we ask them those questions, we start painting a pretty good picture as to why that foundational nutrition is so responsive to their health.
Bill, are you seeing, I guess, in the an opportunity then for this category growth? What do you think it is that kind of triggered magnesium, or what do you think it is that's triggering some of the? I think even though the numbers are small, I feel like to me that's a sign of opportunity, because they're sort of slowly coming online, and as sports nutrition grows or other categories do.
Yeah, I think it's just a question of education, and I'm not, that's kind of always the answer, right? But something happened with magnesium, and I don't know when it happened. You know what?
LA Times just put on a full page, you know, how some of these A-listers and of course, all these different types of media channels are starting to focus on magnesium. So it's fascinating to me when we have an A-lister, an influencer, that's the word I was looking for, that starts to promote a specific element, and because these individuals jump on, you know, onto it, their voice or their face leads to, yeah.
Yeah, because I think at some time in the last decade, it feels like that whole story about the 300 functions in the body. I was selling magnesium in the vitamin aisle, I called it the vitamin aisle, in 1992.
Mineral.
In the mineral aisle, in mineral and center aisle. But I feel like it's been in the last decade that people have talked about these 300, you know, so you use the word sexy. Is it, like that makes it sexier than most of the vitamins, right? It's got 300 functions in the body. And if that's, you know, that's undoubtedly true for a lot of the minerals. And then the mineral combination. So what is the opportunity is education, like why consumers need these. And if I could go on, I think there's two ends of the spectrum. I thought it was really fascinating what Sherry showed us with the low-income households. I'm always noticing the anomalies, which is a nice way of saying missing the point. But I noticed on that slide, Sherry, that there was one health condition where wealthier households over-indexed the lower income, and that was allergies. And it made me think that allergies are a condition of privilege. It's like, oh, you know, like, because it's not food allergies, it was like seasonal allergies. So you go outdoors and you're sneezing. Well, that means you're probably in an outdoor area that has trees, one. Two, you don't have diabetes and other conditions that are going to matter to you more than sneezing, you know, when you're walking, you know, to the bus stop. So I'm making up a big story around that, but it really jumped out at me as the nutrition. Well, so allergies are a condition of privilege. What the real point on that side, though, was I think the highly processed foods, you know, we're talking about food access and equity. On that end of the spectrum, people aren't getting enough nutrition. And then there's the other end of the spectrum where people are, because I think the other real conversation for minerals is soil health. Organic agriculture and soil health and getting food grown in this rich soil. Those consumers are less likely to take mineral supplements because they don't need them because they're eating organic. And I think there's a missed opportunity there too. In our survey work, we notice often that the consumers really believe that if they eat a healthy diet, they don't need to supplement. And then there's truth to that. And especially when we get into organic or we get into regenerative ag, I think we are really getting much more nutrient-dense food. But just eating a healthy diet, if that means I'm getting a salad at McDonald's instead of a burger at McDonald's, there's still going to be a significant mineral deficiency, I would say. So kind of on both spectrums, the lower income, they're just not getting the nutrients, and then the upper income are maybe not getting the story.
I think we have, like, I know the CDC would say, like, it's like 50%, at least 50% consume less magnesium than recommended. I think 70% are deficient in calcium, 90% have inadequate potassium. Like, it just, so and I would count it even, and I'm a big organic fan, but I think even that, I just think our earth quality, our soil health and water, and Jose spends a lot of time in that category, are both, we're not getting, because we're drinking a lot more bottled water than anything else. Anthony, do you want to?
Oh, I'd love to. Bill raises an illuminating point, and I would add this. When you talk about water or hydration, and you apply science to that, people grossly overconsume water. Grossly. If you use biochemical measures of hydration, color of pee is not hydrating. Clear pee does not mean hydration. It's a blood measure. But most people don't get their blood measured for hydration status. So I'm clear. My pure's clear, I'm good, I'm hydrated. And then if you look at the composition of things that are hydration beverages, they are not comprehensive in minerals. But I would offer this additional point. When you have a continuum of nutrition, and you have such a strong push for of these diet evangelists, where a certain diet is advocated from low carb, keto, paleo, those types of diets alone, different discussion in terms of utility and or the benefits, and there's always an inter-individual difference, significant, is that you will find that they typically underconsume mineral-rich foods because of their very narrow selections. And so now, and you also look at their gut microbiota, very different. Again, you have these significant interactions that are often overlooked, and there's that more of the obsession, it's like a pre-GLP-1 obsession, it's the appearance effect of the diet rather than the internal health. And people often are judged by how they look if they're healthy, rarely do they know their interior health. And that's a big oversight because people love to guess and not test. And they think they know their health. Even a vegan, I've interacted with many vegans, from an Olympic gold medalist vegan to others, and I ask them certain questions, and they initially say, oh, I'm very healthy. But I don't sleep well, I fall asleep well, but I don't stay asleep. Or gosh, I have this chronic foot pain, copper, zinc, manganese, etc., and they just don't know. They don't want to get tested, most of them don't. Then you add that to people of less privilege, to what your point was, where you have an inability to pay for the right testing, and now you have a very challenging condition that becomes chronic.
I like to tease on that. You know, we see the water industry today and the $1 billion plus. I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, but I always ask the same question. Again, were we ever designed to live on bottled, filtered, distilled RO water? And we're not. We're supposed to be living on groundwater, spring water, creek water, river water, live, living water. But I know of no place around our nation that individuals, when I ask the question, are you willing, do you walk out to your local creek or river and dip your cup for the day? Now, I know that I have good friends that, every few weeks go out and gather, and it's a work, right? Go out and gather from a natural spring. If you have that privilege, fantastic, but we choose to drink bottled, filtered, distilled RO water because we're concerned about contaminants, which again, do the test, ask the questions, but we have to remineralize that water. We have to put it back. And to me, that's one of the key pieces of being able to educate on putting those minerals back into the water. Keep doing what you enjoy, what you trust, but you have to remineralize it because it was something that, again, we were never designed to drink. And as we put that balance back, I think that, again, we can see just the basics. Sleeping better, feeling better, thinking clearer, and it comes with just a pennies on the dollar.
Yeah. Well, and I can echo a lot of that and what Anthony was saying about grossly over-consuming water, especially in your point, water that's not remineralized properly, or arguably is just potentially detrimental because it's full of contaminants. There's a hierarchy of water quality that I talk about with people, with tap water being, maybe tap water and bottled water being at the very bottom. With spring water, as long as it's actually a good true spring, which there's ways to test that, being at the top, and the continuum going down where you have RO water and all these things that are remineralized. But oftentimes I've seen people that my pee is clear, I'm good to go, and that's just not the case, especially if you're just chugging plastic water, which is bottled water, right? Because nobody knows how long that bottle that they just picked up has been sitting on the shelf. And water is a solvent, as most of you guys probably know. So it's extracting all of those plasticizers into the water, and you're drinking a liquid endocrine disrupting chemical. And many people pound bottles of it away every day. And then what does that do to the gut microbiome? What does that do to the overall presentation of health? And it's the same thing with tap water, which I actually think in some ways can be a little bit more detrimental depending on the local area of what your tap water is, because it's full of disinfecting byproducts, disinfecting biochemicals, whatever you want to call it, all of which have been shown to be endocrine disrupting, cancer promoting, and it's full of fluoride and different types of halogens and bromides which compete for the binding in the thyroid. So it contributes to a lot of these thyroidal problems we're seeing in clinical practice. And so, like Darren said, not all of us have the privilege or the time or any energy or maybe even desire to go get natural water. I am fortunate. There's a spring 45 minutes, 35 minutes away, and I go every few weeks and I bottle 55 gallons up, and I've been doing that for almost 18 years, or 15 years. And it's pretty much exclusively what I drink and cook with. Outside of that, RO water with minerals added back in is pretty much the next best bet. Storage of it's important. Obviously, we talk about plastic, glass, stainless steel, all these different things. Copper can be very useful. It has a lot of properties that are useful with water. The oligodynamic effect, which some of you may be aware of, where copper naturally disinfects water and creates an electric potential through the water. And to your point, Nancy, about soil health and mineral health, one of the most pervasive things, as many of you guys are aware of, is glyphosate use, right? But a lot of people know of glyphosate as a pesticide or herbicide. It's killing everything. They don't know all of the different reasons glyphosate was manufactured for or what it even does. And one of the things it does is it's a non-selective metal chelator. So what that means is toxic metals, yay, but also good metals or minerals in this case, are being chelated by glyphosate in large amounts in all these agricultural areas across the country. And then because of rainwater wash off and all of that, all of the minerals are getting stripped out and go into the ocean. So somehow we need to either get the minerals back out of the ocean and sprinkle them around, or find another solution, which is organic and regenerative agriculture to a big part, because we have to remineralize the soil. That's going to take time. So until then, I'm often recommending that we add those minerals back in wherever we can. We eat a variety of foods so that we can try and get all those minerals at any given time with those different foods. And we try to drink clean water that doesn't have endocrine disrupting chemicals, that doesn't have things that are going to compete with healthy minerals. And if we can, we do, as the saying says, chop wood, carry water before enlightenment and after.
I'm curious, Anthony, you said we're drinking too much water, and if it's not remineralized water, is this what you were just asking? I think, so clearly if there's not enough minerals in the water, we're not getting the minerals. But am I hearing you say too that by drinking that water, we're actually flushing? It's like the more of it, the worse?
Well, there's an effort, there's a cost, and there's perhaps a side effect of all the exposome chemicals that are in bottled or even other types of water. But the more important issue is the perceived need. And if you go to the origins of the 8 times 8 glass a day, it was a book written by a very famous Harvard nutritionist, Frederick Stair. And he made a statement with no scientific citation: perhaps one should drink 8 glasses of water a day. Never validated. Then a group at Yale, a nephrologist, a kidney doctor, took his medical students and he put them through this study where they charted what they ate. You get water from vegetables and fruits, your primary source. If you have coffee, if it's less than 250 milligrams of caffeine, it's hydrating, it's water, it's not diuretic. Beer, non-alcoholic. Alcohol, non-alcoholic. But when you start to add up the actual water intake that's away from water, the imperceptible water, they need 5 glasses a day to maintain a water balance based on biochemical measures. 5. Now, if you're sweating a lot, if you're in a hot, humid environment, different discussion. Then people say, well, my skin looks better, different discussion. But for hydration of body, it's about 5 glasses.
Okay, so a lot of these, like there's these, pillars of health that, as you're saying, some of them are sort of built on house of cards. But what would you say then to someone as far as like, what's your fundamental, like this is what health is, or this is what you need? Where do you start?
Oh, that's such an easy question that I could never answer.
Okay.
It's always a comprehensive. How do you feel? How do you feel when you eat certain foods? How do you sleep? Mood, all these things. It's so difficult, but people know experientially how they're feeling, how they're not feeling, what they'd like to feel like. But the challenge that arises when you have a chronic condition, you become a walking wounded member and you tolerate it. And you forget what it was like to wake up feeling refreshed, or you forget what it was like to be able to walk downstairs without pain, because you just adapt. And I'd love to be able to give you a political statement, soundbite, but it's too comprehensive.
But in a way, it comes down to sleep,
Hard.
nutrition, exercise.
Movement, you gotta put
Movement, like
movement,
those
don't put exercise, you'll
basics,
lose
yeah.
everybody.
Movement and
Exercise
mood.
is everything.
Your mood.
Yeah, mood.
If you're inspired to wake up and get the day done, and if you feel good during the day, the afternoon after that chronic fatigue that comes, or the chronicity of the fatigue in the afternoon, all these things become issues, and we become very adapted to undersleeping and under-recovering.
And I'm just going to stick with you for a minute on that, because I know you've done work too where like that idea of maybe not having, being not totally deficient in minerals, but where that can affect fatigue or even endurance. Is that right? Like,
Well,
research
the
on that?
best and easiest would be iron. And especially when you have the gender of menstruating females, and even that are dysmenorrheic or they have occasional iron loss, then you have the other vanity component above the age of 50 or so, and perimenopausal, the menopausal women who now have the same prevalence of alopecia as males. A significant portion of that alopecia is iron responsive. And women, when they stop menstruating, oh, I don't need iron anymore. You do need iron, and you now have a physical, cosmetic index of iron undernutrition. But the endurance and the mental and the mood, the mental and physical endurance, and also just the quality of life when you're iron insufficient but non-anemic. And most doctors will not catch that, oh, your iron's fine. But they don't measure 2 or 3 other things that give you how much iron does your body have access to.
Okay. Jose, do you have an idea of, or I know we can't answer like the health thing in total, but is there something that you look at when people come in, or?
For total health, like
I guess just for a total health, aspect, or.
Yeah, I mean, much like Anthony said, it's very comprehensive. When I work with people, we're looking at every aspect of health, from social health, how they're doing with their family, and like that's really like psychological. We're looking at diet, we're looking at their stress levels, we're looking at sleep hygiene specifically, and all their habits that could be beneficial or detrimental to their quality of sleep and recovery. We're looking at movement, physical activity level throughout the day. I'm also looking at, one of the big things I also think about a lot is latitude, where they live and how often they're outdoors. A lot of great research, especially more so now, talking about how important it is to be outside. From my perspective, it's not just about vitamin D, it's all the other things that sunlight does when it hits our skin, activates the enos pathway, we get nitric oxide synthesis, cholesterol turns into vitamin D, all these different things. And then little known work by Gerald Pollack on the 4th phase of water, in biological systems. When light hits our cells, it starts to create exclusion zones, which then helps our mitochondria, helps our body, our natural killer cells clean up and do the job they're supposed to do. And in green spaces, they've done studies showing that being outdoors in areas where there's lots of trees, you're exposed to, I believe it's like 200-300% more of near-infrared radiation, because the leaves actually emit more near-infrared. And near-infrared radiation and red light stuff has been studied pretty extensively for all types of benefits for our health, from hormones to collagen elasticity, and I mean, you kind of name it. And all of those things have to be kind of looked at to get a bigger picture of what's going on with this person and how they can, live a better life, figure out what's the trajectory and where they need to go. Fortunately, they always almost need minerals.
Well, and as far as Bill, you had mentioned education, but are we seeing more research or more studies in this area? I know there's a lot more studies on nutrient density happening as well, but are there, what are you seeing research-wise?
I don't actually have an answer to that.
Yeah.
Are we seeing?
Is there?
I mean, I've definitely seen more and more studies. They're always coming out with more and more studies. I mean, there's an old study on crop yields, which I don't remember what year it was done in. Anthony, you might know about it, but where they showed from whatever, the 1800s or whatever, this amount of minerals versus now, and it's very different. Same size, same weight, sometimes even higher weight yield, right? but the yield, it's mostly cellulose, it's mostly water, it's not the minerals. And so there's definitely still studies going on looking at food quality and nutrient density. I know with like Brazil nuts are really high in selenium if they're in an area where there's a lot of selenium in the soil. So if there's not, they're useless. And so it's just one of those things. There's definitely lots of research going on between all of it. And like to education's point, like I think there's way more education out there now. Whether it's correct education is questionable, because I mean that's the big sort of misinformation, disinformation of the influencer prevalence. And there's lots of great influencers out there, you know, that have really good information, or maybe it's just a segment of it. It's not a complete, holistic, full picture of what's going on, but they're giving you at least a tidbit. You have to go run with it and learn more. But there's also a lot of, you know, terrible information out there. So
I think one of those pieces of information that we oftentimes, especially in the mineral industry, it's 1936, there was a doctor by the name of Dr. Charles Northern, presented his information to, well, the information was given to Congress, and one of those, that particular information was that 99% of the American population back in 1936 were deficient in these trace minerals due to agricultural farming technique. Now, by no means am I picking on the farmer here. Heaven knows we need them. Yet at the same time, he went on to state that no matter how delicate that deficiency was in our health, it would sicken, suffer, and shorten our lives. So I asked the question, if that was back in 78 years ago, where are we today as a society? And if we're not taking that if we're not taking that knowledge and being able to use it, especially the one in the mirror, that's the only one that we can actually control. But seeing the difference with us and then being able to share that information, and I think that ultimately we have to be the one taking the role of educating ourselves. And sometimes we have to, I love Anthony because of his background, is he has to use it. We have to feel it. And once we do, that's something that motivates us to keep moving forward and continuing to take it. I oftentimes, and again, we lose between 2.5 to 3 cups of body fluid a day through respiration, perspiration, urination, and defecation. I ask everybody the same question. When is the last time you quit breathing since you left your mother's womb? Because they always ask, when should I be taking it, or how long should I take it? Well, I think that until we stop breathing, we still have that need. So by putting that emphasis back into that mineral balance, remember, if our output of these minerals are greater than our input, your body has to rob cells, tissues, organs, and eventually the bone, just to maintain the homeostasis of our blood. So all this information that we can talk and discuss, we have to put into action, and ultimately it's the ones that are looking in the mirror that says, what did I experience today? And of course, we can talk about all the other challenges as far as stress and medication use and alcohol use, especially in the last 2 or 3 years.
2 or 3 days.
everyone here.
That increases, yeah, what happens in Expo West stays in Expo West, is that what we're hearing? But yeah, those are, again, choices, decisions every single day affect the input and output of these minerals, and we're, just like Anthony said, we can't manufacture, we can't synthesize it, we have to deliver it.
That brings up to me bioavailability, and I think particularly maybe particularly, but I think bioavailability is less of a concern in herbs and botanicals. Moderate in, I'm talking about perception, and moderate in vitamins, but I think maybe with minerals, there's a perception of bioavailability. Eat rocks, and what happens in the body. So I think there's a research and education opportunity there too. But it's a delicate balance, because sometimes too much differentiation between the 7 types of magnesium overwhelms consumers, and then they give up. But I'm just curious about that. I think the bioavailability piece is really important.
Bill, I would offer this Jeopardy game. 2 columns. Column number 1 is a mineral or minerals that you absorb 34% more. Column number 2, we don't know how much more that you absorb, but you have a significantly greater improvement in sleep hygiene and sleep quality. One is a short-term index that may mean no reference to a biological effect. The other is biological effect the benefit. And most bioavailability studies for any constituent are short-term and they don't extend it to, for example, more curcumin doesn't mean more anti-inflammatory effect. You have to show the end result, and that's often not done, almost never done.
And that's actually the biggest opportunity, I think, in all of supplements. More than ever, people are looking for an effect from the supplements. I think it's wonderful what you're hearing about concentrates, and people are like, wait, is there a drug in here? Because so many supplements are taken on faith, and so I think that is really what it comes down to, even more than education. You need the education, you need the understanding in order to get it in the customer's basket. But once they take it, if they feel better, then that's the only education they really need.
Or they don't have a side effect. So a lot of minerals cause iron constipation, magnesium, laxation, or stomach upset. And so that tolerability element is a biological effect too, that you know within an hour or less.
Right, yeah.
On the efficacy front, like how, or just feeling it, like how, in your experience, how long does someone take, say, trace minerals for, to maybe start feeling better? I mean, that's the trick too. Sometimes it's like it takes a bit to actually take some time to feel things.
What we like to do as a company is we give that money back guarantee offer. 30 days, no questions asked. Give us 30 days, but we want an empty bottle back. We don't want a couple of tablets or a couple of drops removed and then turned back. We have to be patient with ourselves, and at the same time, that's the challenge. The information's great, but unless we use it and then compare, how do we know, right?
So I know we're kind of coming up against the hour, the end of the session. Does anybody have any questions? Sorry.
First of all, I want to thank you, panel. This is an awesome meetup.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I have two questions. One is I'd like to challenge trace minerals. I know that they have these saliva strips that you can check to see what your alkaline and your acidity is. Maybe you guys with your scientific background could find out there could be a saliva strip that you can find out just what our mineral count is. Something that we might be able to know just how good we are, so we know what to take, or can at least know what we lack in. That's the one challenge that I have. The other would be, would you be willing, your company, to sell to other small companies, we'll say, raw materials, so that we can work with our product?
I'll answer that question. We do in fact have the opportunity for you to white label with us or use our ingredients. You can reach out to our company and we'll answer any of those questions for you. As far as a Lipton paper that can give you all of the, what you're lacking or what you're, hey, we'll buy that from you and you find a company that has something like that. What I like to address that way is that, again, does one pH fit all, by the way? We test our saliva and we test our urine, but dehydration and alcohol and our daily choice of foods can affect our pH of our saliva and our urine. It's not, it might give us a base, but I think that overall balance and maintaining that consistency with a mineral balancing product will ultimately give us better, I ask the question all the time, where is the most acidic liquid in the human body found? It's found in our gut. It has a pH of about 1.2 to 3, right? Where's the most alkaline solution in the human body found? And we removed this little organ like it was placed there by accident. The gallbladder has a pH of about 7.6 to 8.65. Nothing exceeds 8.65 in the human body, and yet our blood has to maintain almost perfection, right? So one pH doesn't fit all, but it's food choices, it's lifestyle, diet. So there's a lot of variables there that can affect our pH. So I wish there was a magic piece of paper that we could lick or, and find out what those answers, what those questions or concerns are. But I don't think, we're not that advanced yet.
It's a quest for the ages.
Yeah, I think you guys touched on this briefly, but if you do have city water, does a cold filter take the fluoride out? Does it take out the impurities, or what would you install a reverse osmosis in city water? What would you do if you had to drink city water?
Did you hear the question?
Yeah, I heard it. Yeah, it was fine.
Or I wonder if they wrote out here.
Oh, good question.
If you're drinking, what was it? If you're
drinking
city
city water, what are your
What would you
options?
do to treat your water to make it, handle the chlorine and the fluoride and all that?
Yeah, so I mean, my recommendation almost always is like, the highest is installing an RO system or going to get RO water yourself and then adding minerals back in. It's probably the most cost effective. Depending on your living situation, going to get it is probably the most cost effective because home filtration systems are pretty expensive. And there are tabletop machines now. There's so much in water technology that I don't even get into these days because I think it's superfluous. But there are tabletop machines, under-the-counter machines for RO that are more cost-effective, but they produce very, very small volumes. One of the biggest problems with RO water is actually it's sort of wasteful. It uses a lot of water to get to the point where it's at, but it is our best option. There are other types of filtration systems, but they will not pull out everything. There's charcoal-based systems using activated charcoal and some other different kind of chelating, not chemicals, but properties that will bind up a lot. But I don't know of one off the top of my head, and there may be one now because I don't keep up with all of that binds most of it. And I know that the activated charcoal will grab chlorine, it will grab fluoride, it will grab some of the bromides and halogens and those disinfecting byproducts. Because activated charcoal is really useful for grabbing volatile organic compounds. You might be aware of that from air filtration. That's another area which I didn't even talk about, which is air quality, which is another one that's really important. But so activated charcoal is another option. It won't be the best, but it's better. And then adding minerals back in again. We want to saturate the body with the right minerals so that way at least the ones that we need are there, and then they can have a fighting chance against the stuff that's binding and competing. If all you have is the chemical-based ones or the ones that you don't want, then you're going to have an issue. Of course.
Can I take that a step further? Especially for single-parented families that can't go out and just buy, and please tell me, distill it yourself. Bring it to a boil 2 or 3 times. It's not the best, but it's the best that they have to offer, and then remineralize that water. Put it in the glass, or remineralize that water, and of course, again, preferably RO water, but for those that don't have that convenience or that money, they can do some things on their own that can at least support and protect them.
There's a brand called Berkey, B-E-R-K-E-Y, and their filters last about 4 years, depending upon the volume of water that you purify through it, and it's gravity fed. It's countertop.
Yeah, definitely a good one to look into. And I'll second, the boiling water thing is definitely an interesting thing. At least you can get some of those volatile chemicals out. It's actually another, another area for filtration is your shower, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone in here most likely is taking a hot shower. I'm sure some of you are biohacking, taking cold showers, but you're probably not doing it all the time. And this is a rough number, but in a 10-minute hot steamy shower, you're probably inhaling the same equivalent of fluoride or chlorine that's being volatilized because of the steam that you would drink in a gallon of water or so. So a charcoal filter is about the best you can get there, but that will help minimize some of that impact, and then you'll also see some benefits to your skin. It won't be as dry. Because all those chemicals, everyone's went swimming in a pool at some point in their life and have gotten dry skin because chlorine's drying. So.
Well, we're at time, so I was going to let, no one else is coming in. Okay, if you guys want to, if people want to stay, we'll ask some questions.
Secondly, about that water question, it's like we go to the gym a lot, and then there is so many like alkaline water. Is that like a good sauce after we work out? Like what kind of recommendations?
Did you hear that?
You can go back
Alkaline
and
water.
Oh, alkaline water.
Oh, wow. Go ahead.
Again, our mouths love high pH. This is like the oral cockpit to our entire systems, right? I think that a lot can be said as to what our teeth, our gum lines, our tongue, our tissue is telling us. But when we swallow, our mouths love high pH. But again, show me in nature, or show me in our body where we have a 9.0 pH anywhere in the body. Yet when we swallow, that pH is no more than 1.2 to 3 on our, because if we neutralize, again, I think it's not what we're eating, it's what's available and what we're absorbing, right? And if we stop that absorption, there again is a whole other issue of challenges that we're now competing, that we shouldn't have to compete against, but I think that, again, great marketing.
You have a question right here?
I had a question about the metabolome with respect to minerals, and I think maybe Anthony, you brought it up, but are microbial metabolites being seen or not being seen due to mineral deficiencies, and if so, like what's being presented? Let's say if someone is mineral deficient in X, Y, or Z, are there like key markers for that in the metabolome?
So he's asking about what's called the metabolome. You may have heard of genome, proteome, metabolome. Those are all the metabolites in a certain body part or organ. Here would be typically fecal or blood. And the fecal metabolome are all the chemicals that are present in the stool that are often produced as a result of bacteria, primarily bacteria in the gut, acting upon things that you eat. And there are thousands of chemicals, if not tens, but only a small part have been targeted for analysis. And the most prominent and well recognized would be the short chain fatty acids. And we do know from animal work and some preliminary human work that minerals can affect the production of short chain fatty acids. And if you go onto a low fiber or a high protein, low carb, higher fat diet, your metabolome is also changed dramatically, including short chain fatty acids. And so that to me is the opportunity, again, 5 years from now, we're going to have a very different discussion on what minerals do in relation to gut metabolism and anything linked to the joints, brain, skin, etc., axes.
I just have one last question. This is for Jose. So going back to the topic of testing nutrients, you briefly alluded to having issues with using hair analysis. So I was just wondering what your perspective is on that.
I mean, one of the biggest issues is if anyone treats their hair. And a lot of people treat their hair. It's very common. And also different hair products that persist in your hair will skew the testing. So the number that you'll get back from that is not correct. If you can, use it for, and also it's showing something in the past mostly. It's not an active measurement, right? So we can take the hair analysis and we can utilize it as a part of the picture, but you want to then look at symptoms. You want to look at blood lab work. You might want to look at salivary test, fecal matter tests, functional analysis, so you can get a bigger picture of what's really going on with certain vitamins and minerals. And people that treat their hair, almost always their hair shows up really high in arsenic, cadmium, and lead. I even think even in people who smoke regularly, like you see high levels of cadmium, but that can mask other things. So it's just not the best test, but it does give us a window. That's kind of where I was going with that.
And you can complement with certain blood and or urine work too, not as a single bullet test.
Thank you. Yeah, I know that blood work can be very static and captures information in that moment in time, so that's why I was wondering about how that compared with hair.
So we'll take the last question.
So our very last question. Thanks so much for speaking. It's been really amazing, informative. I just wanted to ask, have you looked at any other places where you can gain those minerals outside of water, like the streams you're talking about? Have you looked into bee pollen at all to see the contents within that, to see if that's a good place to get minerals? I'm just curious.
Personally, yeah, that's another great source. I mean, I'm not aware of all of the different minerals in it. I know it's very comprehensive. I've recommended bee pollen in certain situations for years. I lump that into my dietary recommendations. And it can be a primary one because it's not necessarily linked to soil quality the same way.
But the amounts of many of the minerals that are called macrominerals, non-trace, you would have to consume bowls full, which may cause allergic or intolerance reactions. So it could be part of a comprehensive food-based intake system or plan.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for your time, Sherry.